Welcome everybody. My name is Rich Reed. I'm the director of the library, and I'm so glad you can join us tonight. You're welcome to return in a week. We're going to have our circulation manager, Ashley McLean. She's going to share on her travels, family travels to New Zealand with a special focus on the Lord of the Rings sets in New Zealand, so that'll be a fun travelogue. We are always delighted to co-host events with the Mount Desert Historical Society, and we're so pleased to get the newest issue of the Chebacco this past week. We have some extra ones back there if you guys want to look at some of the historic ones. And yeah, you can check them out as well. So please welcome Assistant Director of Program Coordinator Lisa Taffley-Murray.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you, E-Rich, thanks Kate, and thank everybody at the Southwest Harbor Library for collaborating with us again for our Chebacco author series for 2026. These are a series of free public programs based on the articles in the current edition of Chebacco, and it allows our authors to do a bit of a deeper dive. And as Everett said, I do have some copies of this year's up there if you haven't seen it, and then we have last year's up there as well. Our next program here at Southwest Harbor Library is on June 23rd, and it features Kathleen Schmidt, author and science communications specialist with the Schoodic Institute, who will be discussing her article, Inspired by Trees, the Revolutionary Nature of Mount Desert Island Forests. And on June 3rd at the Northeast Harbor Library, MDI Historical Society Director Rainey Bench will take us on a lively romp through some of the island's lesser-known stories in What Happened Here. I have event flyers up here if you want to see all of our spring and summer programming, and you're welcome to join our email events list as well. And if you enjoy yourself tonight in this program and Chebacco, I encourage you all to become members. It supports programming like this and supports the publication of Chebacco every year. Each spring, the MDI Historical Society invites individuals, organizations, and civics groups to contribute to Chebacco, which we've been publishing for 22 years. Every edition explores a different theme. Last year's was the art of nourishment, which was all about food, and this year's we're turning our attention on the ongoing democratic journey on Mount Desert Island. And if you're wondering about the name, a Chebacco is a style of boat built in 18th century New England, and it's the vessel on which the island's first permanent European settlers, the Abraham Soames and his family, arrived in 1762. For this year's edition, we knew a history of the League of Women Voters on Mount Desert Island would be a compelling edition. So we reached out to the group to explore the idea. Cara Ryan had joined the League less than a year earlier, and a fellow member and friend, Claire Fox, knew she was a writer and editor and nudged her to take it on. From that point forward, Cara became a familiar presence at the Historical Society, poring over folders of documents and photographs from our archive. The result is her article, Now More Than Ever, A History of MDI's League of Women Voters in its Work to Safeguard Democracy, which appears in this year's Chebacco. Cara's piece traces the League's evolution from its suffragist roots through its mid-century growing pains into a remarkably active period from the 60s through the 1990s and on to a dynamic reinvigoration in the 21st century. It's a fascinating lens on both local and national women's history, filled with colorful characters who have remained steadfast in their non-partisan commitment to free and fair elections. Originally from Illinois, Cara began what she calls the wonderful, if hopeless, quest of becoming a Mainer when she remarried a Bar Harbor native in 1985. She is a professional copy editor, quilter, and independent scholar who, when not traveling the world, calls Bar Harbor home. So please join me in welcoming Cara Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa and the library, for inviting me to do this. Yeah, I'll try to move pass this. And I'm gonna have to read it because there's just a lot of text and I just couldn't remember it all. But here we have Jane Addams and which is, of course, before there could be a League of Women Voters, American women had to get the vote. The fight was long, more than 70 years, and often painful. The women fighting it needed strategy, unfortunately, some of it seriously racist, and determination. Progressive Chicago reformer Jane Addams stuck to her message of women's duty being increasingly hindered by their inability to vote. The workings of government, she argued, weren't so different from those of the household. Both involved caring for others, something women had long already done. She and her partner, Mary Rosette Smith, bought Ewell Craig on Lookout Point in Bar Harbor in 1909. It was both a writing retreat for Addams and a fundraising base for her many reform projects. She famously said she could raise more money in a single month in Bar Harbor than all the rest of the year back home in Chicago. In 1914, the Bar Harbor Record described Southwest Harbor's Masonic Hall, decked out in the yellow bunting of the suffrage movement, a full house, all eager to hear Miss Jane Addams. There was a caption on this photo, which I've sort of shrunk down a bit, that said that that's Jane Addams at Ewell Craig, but I'm pretty sure it isn't because I think that's a palm tree at the back, and there were others that were more, that's why I partly cropped them out. I don't know why somebody misidentified it, and I also talked to friends who live on Lookout Point Road, and they said that there's no house quite like that, and it didn't look like one from the past, because we've got like amateur historians everywhere. She was called the League's spiritual godmother, partly because of her message prior to women's suffrage, but also because she really moved on after 1920. She had so many other kinds of work she wanted to do, so she didn't just stick with the League. I'm not sure why it doesn't advance. In 1917, the paper describes a similar appearance at the new YWCA building, built in 1912, where Addams laid out what she called the moral aspect of equal suffrage, urging women to wake up to the realities of modern life. Momentum was now growing. In 1919, Maine would be the 19th state to sign on, and by August 1920, the crucial 36th state was secured, and the 19th Amendment was ratified, giving American women, if only white women, the right to vote. Our YW, by the way, is one of only two left in the state of Maine, and the only one to provide affordable housing for women. Learn a lot. I'm having trouble advancing, Kate. Why is that? What am I?
Can you click to the right and the left on your?
This guy? Yeah, okay.
There you go.
The artist of this Life magazine cover is Charles Dana Gibson, nearing the end of his influencer career as the creator of the so-called Gibson Girl, the model at the turn of the last century's new woman, independent, educated, and physically active, but never quite activist. Gibson also had ties to the island, alighting in Bar Harbor with the social elites of the 1880s and 90s, but he was at best a reluctant supporter of women's suffrage. His wife, though, was a suffrage, and in 1920 she won. Meanwhile, Carrie Chapman Catt, president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, with its 2 million members, now had to decide what to do. She quickly pivoted and formed the League of Women Voters in an attempt to hold on to that vast network. The League, as she envisioned it, would be a non-partisan group dedicated to candidates, not to candidates or parties, but to teaching women how to use their new power to improve their lives and shape the system in which they were now full voting members. I like this drawing because I think it shows the true new woman, disheveled, no longer, wearing a corset and the big hair, but gaining something a lot more valuable. I guess that's right. Building on its suffrage base, the League had a strong national system supported by state and local chapters. But those local bases tended to be in big cities rather than rural areas. So while Portland and Bangor had chapters, there was very little League presence on MDI in the first decades. Early efforts to get out the vote saw women from those cities, again in partnership with the YW, trying to drum up participation across the state. A few newspaper clippings were the only traces I could find of the League anywhere on MDI through the 20s and 30s. Then I hit a vein at the University of Maine at Orono's library archive that generously houses 98 boxes of Maine League materials. Suddenly a story opened up. In 1940, 20 Southwest Harbor women were organizing, electing officers, and communicating with the State League for official approval and guidance. They added a few members over the following months, including Mrs. Cece Little of Bar Harbor. But despite a strong start, the group dissolved just a year later when World War II broke out. Because the League was so short-lived and my focus was primarily on League activity, I didn't initially dive very deep into the list of members. But I was curious, so at the March presentation of this talk at the Jessup Library, I wondered aloud, who were these women and why Southwest Harbor? Happily, a current League member and Tremont resident, the great Linda Washburn, was there and also curious. She asked me to send her the 1940 member list. And so began a long email exchange with Linda, subject line on the list. The portrait that emerged of these women I came to feel poignantly reflects the aspiration and possibilities of women working together in a unique time and place. They're both local and from away, with more or less money, but all with the desire to be of civic service. The connections and stories we discovered seemed worth sharing independent of their formal League work. Starting with the 5 or maybe 7, we don't have great data on all of them, Southwest Harbor natives. Here we see Phyllis Grindle, who became Mrs. Woodrow Wilson Herrick. Ironic because of Wilson's reluctance to support suffrage. For many women, we had only their husband's name with a Mrs. in front, but often a little digging brought more to light. Phyllis Herrick lived on Clark Point Road and worked in the Bass Harbor sardine factory. Here she is, circa 1940, with her husband and son Richard. An irresistibly cute picture, I thought. Another local girl was Gladys Mayo, who left her hometown to teach music in Massachusetts, returning after a time as Mrs. Crocker. After her husband died in 1938, she's described in the census as a housekeeper. There's also a Bessie Noyes, born in Tremont, longtime reporter for the Bar Harbor Times, and fondly remembered at Carol's Drugstore, where she worked for decades as a clerk. I also found a rhubarb pie recipe. I almost thought if it were time I could have made some, but I haven't seen any rhubarb. Also on the list, and likely local, the wife of a carpenter named Brodemarkle, who built the summer house of another member, a Mrs. Alfred Herfeld, already a league leader in New York. Linda dubbed her the Southwest League influencer. A couple of women were from elsewhere in Maine, but nearly all the out-of-state members came from either Boston, often with family connections to Southwest Harbor, or New York. Mrs. John Whitmore, on the right here, born Edna Mae Thompson, gets the prize for being from farthest away. She was born in San Francisco, moved to Southwest Harbor from Hawaii in the mid-30s, but her husband's hometown probably already felt like home, even after he died in 1933. John Whitmore had gone to Hawaii in 1902 to work with his cousin Jim Dole, who needed someone to can the pineapple he was growing in the remote Pacific Islands. It seems that the Carrolls and the Doles were also distantly related. You can see also there's Lucy Ella Lawler Whitmore on the left, and then a Carroll in between. We found another Dole on the list, hidden under the name Mrs. Horace Mann II. Winifred Dole, 1882 to 1978, was the Pineapple Man's sister from the same progressive family in Boston that summered at the Ledge on Vernal Point Road for 50 years. She married Horace Mann II, grandson of the famous education reformer and himself an educator. On retiring to Southwest Harbor, Winifred proved herself an invaluable member of the community. Here she's seen donating the town's first ambulance. She died in Southwest Harbor in 1978 at nearly 100. I love that, ambulance. And it just so happens last summer when I was gardening, I found a 1967, a 67 like match car, like replica, was completely encased in mud. And I, of course, restored it, so it's adorable. And I repainted it and everything. And I looked it up, so I know, stupid history of a little Max car. Anyway, Among the New Yorkers on the list were Grace Simmons and her close friend and early Brooklyn neighbor Mabel Colvin. Both summered in Southwest Harbor their entire lives. In 1922, Simmons bought the Harmon property on and was pretty We have Grace Simmons there to the left with the white shirt, and Dorothy Rand is at the back with a beret. She's the second wife of the photographer Henry Rand. She donated her husband's entire collection of photos, 1,400 or so, to the library on her death in 1973. And she was the local president of the League, which you may remember. Mabel Colvin, Bessie Noyes, and Mrs. Brodemarkle are in the photo somewhere, but they're not specifically identified. And I can't tell you the other people because I didn't take them all down, because I was kind of focused on just League members. It doesn't advance, Kate. Yeah. Oh, okay, that's right. In their brief organization as a League chapter, we know the Southwest Harbor group met with town staff to learn how local government runs, hosted speakers, and held at least one candidate forum. The State League was clearly sorry to see their infant chapter, as they kept referring to them, disband, but between gas rationing and the many disruptions of war, it seemed to lose critical momentum. Though some remained members at large, paying dues and staying informed of League work, it would be another 20 years before the next Island League would emerge. Fast forward to the summer of '63, when calls for a new MDI League appear in the Bar Harbor Times. The invitation seemed sincere and broad. Since the branch will be taking up local issues, it's important to have the thinking and help of as many island women as possible. On November 21st, the paper reports that 37 women had now formed a new MDI League of Women Voters. JFK was assassinated the next day. Kennedy was a fan of the League and once said, quote, "With increasing momentum and skill, the League of Women Voters has assumed responsibility for the study and analysis of some of the most pressing local, national, and international problems. You have earned a reputation for objectivity and accuracy," end quote. Nationwide, the League was proving itself, and island women signed on to become Maine's 12th chapter. This was a time of progress, of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which moved the country closer to true universal suffrage, something now stunningly undermined by a recent Supreme Court decision. Per League requirements, the first task of the new chapter was to produce an information pamphlet, usually called Know Your Town. Here it was, "This is Mount Desert Island," and covered basic government, school organization, and other civic information for all the island towns. Then the group had to decide which local topics they believed most pressing and select from state and national issues already identified by the League. In '63, it was the Maine tax system and constitution, and at the national level, foreign economic policy and the UN. MDI women fully embraced the League's method of study, discussion and consensus, and then action. And again, when I gave this talk at the Jessup in March, I asked if anyone recognized the illustrator for these covers, because there's no signature. Within 24 hours, I learned it was Francis Hamabi, the same artist whose murals commemorated Grace Simmons in the children's room here. His work was ubiquitous in Maine, as you probably know, in the 50s through at least the 80s. Found everywhere from Down East Magazine to local festivals and galleries. Also likely a Hamabi, this is the letterhead of the local League stationery. Researching this part of the story was especially fun for two reasons. First, the treasure trove at the MDI Historical Society, most of it donated by LaRue Spiker. The yellowed newspaper clippings and 50-year-old photos in their League archive are priceless. palpable bridges to an endearing past. I also got to know some of the members of this earlier group, still very much alive, and listening to their stories, I could feel what the League had meant to them, how it helped them find their voice and take the work they did together seriously. Cara Ryan, one of the youngest members to join in the late 60s, shared some of these last sheets of stationery from her time as president. LaRue Spiker, who, unlike a surprising number of women, even in the 60s, did not wear a husband's name, was a gift for the MDI League. She merged her passion for conservation and social justice with her great writing skill, both as reporter and regular essayist in the local papers. Her columns brought attention and style to the League's work, a spotlight that wouldn't dim even when the focus grew uncomfortable. Spiker dug in on the contamination of Marshall Brook and the Bass Harbor Marsh, keeping on the authorities for action and broadening the issue to include better monitoring and protection of all freshwater resources on the island. But of course, she didn't work alone. All the members brought their own skills and passion. Louise Gilbert was remembered by one Maine League member as uniquely willing to attend state meetings from MDI. Quote, "The word was they never left the island," end quote. In her case, in any case, they did think beyond the island, seriously studying nuclear and other toxin risks, energy conservation and alternatives, Maine poverty, and the national campaign for the Equal Rights Amendment, still not recognized today, among their many causes. They saw connections between the island and the world in every issue, especially when focused on the environment. They shared generously what they learned through articles, public forums with invited speakers, and visits to schools. One campaign that got wide media coverage was their push for better waste management and recycling in 1975. They filled trailers with bottles and cans they picked up in one morning along routes 3 and 102 to demonstrate both the waste and the litter that comes from the lack of recycling incentives. They campaigned for the returnable bottle bill, which became Maine law in 1978. They also pushed hard and for years for better cooperation around waste management, something we're still trying to figure out 50 years later. I believe that's Sally Kroc on the left, and that's definitely Mary Boer. I sent a picture to her as I was doing this research, and she wrote an email back, and so nice to wake up to that great history. And I love this little piece by LaRue Spiker. You know, it says something like, the Booth Bay area has one, the Camden region has one, and so does the Bangor Brewer area. And the MDI area is thinking about it. We're still thinking about it. And I thought this was really an impressive lineup of speakers, and they did this annually at the MDI Bio Lab. This is LaRue Spiker on the left. Somebody named, I don't know, Sally Bedell Clark? Yeah, and Patty Letcher Ryan on the right. I love that. That's like, you know, quintessential women thinking. In the 80s, as nuclear issues loomed, a dedicated committee led by Patty Ryan studied Chernobyl, partnered with filmmakers, and held debates. Once the group reached consensus, they shared their position against both nuclear power and nuclear weapons, arguing for safer, more environmentally sound energy options, and, like Jane Addams, for peace. When they were accused of being too partisan, they had a trenchant response to that, too. You can see Louise Gilbert's, explaining that nonpartisan doesn't mean we're not political. It means we don't back individuals and parties. So the Memorial Day Peace March, this is 89, and then that rather wild float in the 4th of July parade in Bar Harbor in 1989 also. And other bits in the article suggesting that alternatives to bombs, articles on a film and discussion on the interconnectedness of nations with Dr. Tibby Russell of the Jackson Lab, a debate on the safety of the Maine Yankee and what an evacuation plan would look like in the event of an accident when it sits on a fault and at the head of a peninsula. I mean, they just dug into the details here, which I had no idea about. Yep. And then throughout, even with their deep dives and advocacy on many diverse issues, the MDI League of these decades never lost sight of the basic lever of democracy, the vote. They consistently provided reliable election information about national ballot items and, through surveys and forums, educated voters about local candidates. Here we see, identified as Mrs. Hans Meyer, you may know her now as Gail Reber, and Mrs. Neil Goosefield, who lived on Ledge Lawn in Bar Harbor. That's in that photo on the left. And this is Alvin Moss, who was the league president in Maine. Men were allowed into the group of the league as of 1974. And that's Jill Goldthwait there in the middle. And a note of appreciation from a voter after reading all their election material, saying, now I understand what the League of Women Voters is really trying to do. In one of their last big projects, this group published a 40-page pamphlet in 1988 describing the effects of the previous 10 years of development on MDI. It followed a public tour of the island and compiled economic and environmental data, as well as stories of multi-generational local families losing younger members as housing became less affordable. Way back. The authors asked residents to consider who was really benefiting, who or what was being lost, and was this the future people wanted? The text concludes by suggesting more cooperation between towns, better environmental protections, and stricter guidelines for development. I kind of love that advertisement for the tour, saying that it's not planned as the high point of your summer entertainment, but we hope it will offer insights to assure the quality of your life here. Widely distributed across the island, the study hit a nerve, spurring discussions, public forums, and articles and letters to papers from Bar Harbor to Bangor. It inspired the creation of MDI Tomorrow, which in turn was the catalyst for the Island Housing Trust. As with so many stories from this era, the Island League was prescient in identifying and spotlighting difficult issues that continue to haunt us today. They raised awareness, nudging reflection and sometimes long-term solutions. There's some good, these are very good summaries of the study. The one on the right is by Earl Breckland and at the Ellsworth American. By the late 90s, the League of Women Voters at all levels was strained by the national shift that had begun in the 80s. In Maine, rips over nuclear energy, abortion, and other increasingly partisan issues were taking their toll. Locally, members of the Island League found their hands full with jobs, family, and health issues, not to mention crucial losses when some of their leaders, like Louise Gilbert and LaRue Spiker, died in the mid-90s. Women across the country were entering government and other jobs just as their social and environmental causes were taken up by professional rather than volunteer activism, in effect co-opting the League's work, which to some extent now had to reinvent itself. Partly to compensate for dwindling members, the MDI group merged with members in Hancock and Washington counties to form the Down East League in 1996. But even this expanded chapter was on the verge of dissolving when Ann Luther, new to both the area and the League, offered to take over the books in 1998. She not only kept the Down East ship upright and brought her finance background to the State League, serving as co-president, president, and treasurer, professionalizing its work and bringing its budget from $16,000 in 2003 to nearly $800,000 today. I know, it's insane, largely through grants and donations. Her work throughout has remained focused on fundamentals. Her mantra, making democracy work through civic engagement, includes everything from breaking down barriers to voting and securing elections to helping citizens understand the ramifications of every vote. This picture is from 2013 when she won the Maine ACLU's highest award for her work on public policy, voting rights, clean elections, and ethics in government. Beginning in the early 2000s, wanting to expand the League's outreach, Anne partnered with Linda Washburn at WERU Community Radio in Blue Hill to create the Democracy Forum program. After the 2016 election, this award-winning show became a regular monthly feature. It had been like every 4 years they would, do a number of shows for like the upcoming election. Pairing experts, public officials, and leaders in Maine with other distinguished guests, whether analysts or scholars, usually from out of state. Democracy Forum tackles everything from how to protect Maine voters and elections to the threat billionaire economics and expanded presidential power threats. Did I say that threat? To the threats that billionaire economics and expanded presidential power pose to democracy. They're really good programs. Discussions are penetrating and take the necessary time to unpack complex issues. They're available anytime online at WER's website. In the 21st century, the work of the Down East League merges seamlessly with that of the state. The list you see here includes just some of the highlights of the Maine League's projects and partnerships over the last 30 years. It was a staggering list, and it was actually kind of hard to assemble because the Maine League's very informative website naturally focuses on really recent stuff rather than like the successes of the last 10, 20, or 30 years. Maine's elections consistently ranking among the cleanest, highest turnout in the country is not unrelated to this work. The Maine League in the 21st century has creatively initiated legislation and partnerships to buttress all aspects of practical democracy. Yeah, some of these are pretty, you probably know much of it. The National Voter Registration Act of '93, the Clean Election Act of 1996. There are just many different projects and legislation to protect and expand access. I mean, we have a really great, like absentee ballot system that's better than most states. Ranked choice, Maine was the first state to use ranked choice RCV in 2018. National popular vote is something we keep pressing because clearly, the gerrymandering situation is only getting worse. Anyway, partners include Maine Citizens for Clean Elections, Maine Students Vote, Maine Freedom of Information Coalition, Alliance for Maine Women, Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, Maine Center for Economic Policy, and WERU. I ran this list by Anne, and I said, is this like representative? And she just says, yes, and so much more. Once a year, League members from around the state gather in Augusta for Advocacy Day. When they hear speakers on current issues, lobby or learn to lobby, like myself, they're representatives in the State House and meet other members from around the state. This year, too, the Maine League welcomed its new executive director, Chrissy Hart, on the right, up there, on the right. And you probably know a lot of those people. That's Claire Fox, Ruth Eveland, Ann Luther, Nicole Grohowski, Nancy Martin. This is Jen Lancaster. She's also really important in Portland. Locally, the League continues to help get out the vote through registration drives, gives presentations on how Maine government works, and sponsors candidate forums, like this one last night. Members literally go to schools, they go to homeless shelters, to get people who have never registered, get registered. And then this guide to local government on the bottom left, that's actually on the Maine League website, it's a really clear and comprehensive explanation of how our rather tortured government works. We also recognize and thank our frontline election workers every May during Town Clerk Appreciation Week. So you probably know Liz Graves in Bar Harbor, and let me think their names, you guys know, Jennifer LaHaye and Madeline Michaud in Southwest, and Claire Woolfolk on the left in Mount Desert with her team, and Sarah Abbott in Tremont. This year I went around to the Blue Hill Peninsula and saw people in really small towns like, what was it? There's Brooklyn, there was Verona Island, 500 people. And yeah, and they've never been visited by the League, so we're trying to get more appreciative. And they're lovely, just lovely women, actually, and working really hard because in the smaller towns, they have to do that much more. They're not just registration, and they have an amazing amount of work. And sometimes the League protests. Ann Luther spoke at last year's No Kings rally on behalf of the League, explaining that being nonpartisan is not the same as being neutral. Quote, when democracy itself is under threat, When voter access is restricted or when misinformation spreads, we're going to take sides and we're going to speak out. And we'll do that based on our principles. We're in that moment now, and all the more so now. The foundational principles, this is still Ann Luther, that have sustained our democracy, checks and balances, the rule of law, free and fair elections, are under direct and sustained threat. Rolling back voting rights, undermining free and fair elections are the tools authoritarian governments use to cement their chokehold on power. For them, the only acceptable election is one they can't lose. That's not what the League stands for. That's not democracy. She then described the referendum, roundly defeated in November, that would have drastically curtailed absentee voting, something Mainers rely heavily on. 61% of all Maine seniors who voted in 2024 voted by absentee ballot. An updated, still more repressive version of this act, the SAVE Act 2.0, is currently still sitting with the Senate. And it's maybe on its way down. Just as in 1924, last year too, the League offered pledge sheets for voters to commit, no longer just to vote, but now 100 years later, to vote against new laws that would peel away decades of progress and disenfranchise millions. Again, you may know these people. That's Ruth Eveland, Rick Lyles, and then Ann Luther, Judy Lyles, Claire Fox, Kathy Stark, Lisa Bradley, and somebody who just wandered in. So this is American democracy is a work in progress. We're painfully realizing both its flaws and its vulnerabilities these days. Still, it's what we've got, and surely worth fighting for. And right now, when defending democracy feels like one battle after another, I'm glad the League of Women Voters has its back. I put the League's website up here. It's a good resource. You can sign up, even if you don't want to be a member, just to get email updates. And there are more materials here if you want to see them. And that's all I've got. Yeah, thank you to Emily's different. Yeah, I don't know if I can answer your questions, but I'll try. Yes, Carl.
Well, I just wanted to mention that, thanks. Just wanted to mention that there's an exhibition of Francis Famabi opening in June at the Castine Historical Society.
Oh, very fun. Yeah.
I just was down there yesterday helping to install
Cool.
it, so very
Yeah.
exciting. But I also wanted to mention, I think one of the things that the League worked against was what is it? It's called TABOR. It was the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. You all remember that?
Yeah.
Anyway.
When was that? I never came across it.
Geez, I don't know, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago. My time frame was, but it was called TABOR.
Okay. I'll look it up. TABOR.
Yeah, TABOR.
I'll look it up. I've got one more version of this to give to the League itself.
There you go.
Yeah, gotta be sharp. They don't know the old history though. But everybody's really curious, you know, because most of the members are like of the last 15, 20 years. So.
I think I just might have missed it. Could you go back to the very beginning of who started, why she, it wasn't the League, but it was just for suffrage. I just missed that.
Jane Addams?
Yes.
So yeah, that's Jane Addams, who very few people seem to have known or know, actually had a place. She was a Chicago native and, you know, basically lived there, but she loved the island and she had a place on Lookout Point Road in Bar Harbor that she and her partner bought, and then she would come for a month, 2 months, and raise money and write, and just, it was her home away from home.
But what was her issue?
She was a definite sort of proponent of the League, but of suffrage, of course, before that. The League, interestingly, she was on the board of the League in the beginning, but she was campaigning hard for, Hubert, who would it be in 1940? Hubert, the presidential candidate that she was so big on. She was out there too much campaigning for, and as a board member of the League, they asked her to step down, and she said, well, that's my own time, and it's kind of fun, conflict of interest fun. And she she had to sit down, which was fine with her because she also was a huge advocate for peace. I mean, she was, you know, you're asking about Jane Addams, just kind of general work. She was the founder of Hull House in Chicago, and she was very much like a workers' rights person, trying to find, you know, like big affordable housing for the working poor of Chicago. She was very, very active. And then she got into international work after 1920, so she was abroad quite a bit. But
One follow-up, when was the League started anywhere?
1920,
1920.
and literally even before we actually had the vote, Carrie Chapman Catt, not wanting to like miss a beat, she formed this, and then like assuming we would all go through by August of 1920, and then it was already in place when women got the vote in August of 1920. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Oh, you got a question, thank you.
I've got a comment. LaRue Spiker is the reason that we no longer have open sewage in the harbor out here in Southwest Harbor.
Yeah, I know. She's amazing.
That's part of it.
I know. There's so much on her that I could have, yeah. I think other people have written about her in Chebacco. I know, she's amazing.
Do you have any other research you're working on right now?
Not island stuff.
Yeah.
Although my parents-in-law were very interesting, kind of like contribution to this island for many years, and from China, and yeah, I find that whole story interesting, so I've been working on that.
All right.
But it's complicated.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ingrid.